Waiting for Vic.
Chair. Yeah, we're now live, Chair.
Thank you very much, and welcome to this virtual extraordinary cabinet meeting that's being conducted with members and officers at various locations, communicating via audio, video and online. There is also the opportunity for the public and press to listen and view proceedings. Before the meeting starts, I would like to invite the committee member and scrutiny manager to explain how proceedings will work and to confirm that members and officers are in attendance.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So when I call your names, if you can just respond so that we know that you can hear and be heard. Councillor Ian Albert.
Yep.
Councillor Judy Billing.
Yes.
Councillor Paul Clark.
Present.
Councillor Elizabeth Dennis Harburg.
Present.
Councillor Keith Hoskins.
Yep, here.
Councillor Steve Jarvis.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Martin Steers Hanscom.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Ian Mansell.
Yeah, I'm here.
Councillor Ruth Brown.
Present.
Hello. Officers Anthony Roche.
Here, present.
Ian Cooper.
Yes, present.
Jeanette Thompson.
Present.
We have Vic Godfrey supporting us with IT, and I'm Hilary Janine. I don't think I've missed anyone. Thank you very much. So the meeting is being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel and recorded via Zoom. If live streaming fails, the meeting will adjourn. If the live stream cannot be restored within a reasonable period, then the remaining business will be considered at a later date. Please stay in view of the cameras at all times. If for any reason the meeting is not quorate, an officer will notify attendees. The meeting will adjourn immediately. Once the meeting is quorate, the meeting will resume. If connection cannot be restored within a reasonable period, the remaining business will be considered at a later date. Only members present for the entire debate and consideration of an item are entitled to vote. If a member loses connection, the chair may adjourn the meeting for a short period to enable connection to be established. If the chair does not adjourn the meeting, the member will be deemed to have left at the point of failure and be deemed to have returned at the point of re-establishment. Please ensure that your mobile phone and any other noise emitting devices are muted. And please activate the mute button on your tablet or computer when you're not speaking, and be mindful that you can be seen by others. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the raise hand button as usual. And please remember to unmute your microphone before you speak. When requested to vote, voting will be via the normal procedure of green tick for yes, red cross for no, and blue raise hand for abstain. To enable the votes to be counted, please do not clear your vote until requested to do so. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? In that case, I'll hand over to the Chair, Councillor Martin Steers Hanscom. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hilary. Item 1 is apologies for absence. We've had apologies from Gary Grindle, Sean Prendergast, Kay Tart, Carol Stanier, Sam North and Helen Oliver. Are there any other apologies? No. In that case, we'll move on to Chair's announcements. In accordance with Council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recordings will be available to view on mod.gov and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. Members are reminded that this council has declared a climate emergency. This is, and we continue to say this, and that's important, a serious decision, and means that as this is an emergency, all of us, officers and members, have that in mind as we carry out our various roles and tasks for the benefit of the district. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder, of course, is about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. So we move straight away to the item 3, Hertfordshire Growth Board proposed joint committee. I'm going to be introducing this, and I'm sure you have all read the papers. You'll all be familiar with the work of the Growth Board. Over the last 2 years, the 10 districts and boroughs working with the County Council have looked at the needs of all the districts for future infrastructure and are looking to work with government to achieve a funding deal to be able to achieve the infrastructure for the next plan period. Now, in the report, there are a good number of appendices and annexes. And I want to refer to Appendix A, which starts on page 13 of the report, and in particular to draw your attention to pages 16 and 17 and sections 4.1 and onwards. And as the report says, the where am I going? Yeah, it's actually, yeah, Appendix A. Let me get to the right page and not trip over myself. You'll see there's an awful lot of bullet points and small letters under 4.1 outlining what we're all about, and in particular I'd refer you to H, I and J. There is work going on. We have a number of projects that are being developed, and there's been some really good working together across the county, and the objectives are outlined there. And in 4.2, we talk about the functions that are delegated to the special committee we're establishing. But what's very important is 4.3, which is very clear of those things that are excluded from the work of this committee, because clearly, and one of the things we have been arguing about very carefully, and we've gone through with a fine-tooth comb through all the annexes and appendices and reports to ensure that what we're not having is a situation where either this board or any other districts are doing things to North Herts that North Herts does not want. That's been very much one of our major concerns. So we have sought and received the assurances that we required. I will come back later on when we're looking at the recommendations to the other recommendations in terms of the representatives. But for the moment, I think I'd like to invite Jeanette to add. I've got do you want to come in now, Steve, or do you want to wait to Jeanette to add to the report?
I just thought I probably needed to declare that I'm a member of the county council.
Oh,
given that
not
this is an
sure.
agreement that includes
Yeah.
the county council. I don't think that prevents me from participating.
No, I'm sure
I
that's
need
not
to
it.
declare that
Yeah.
it's the case.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
God.
Thanks,
Something
Steve.
else.
Sorry,
Oh gosh, sorry.
No, it's fine. It's
you are
fine.
too.
We're all party to this.
But
Okay.
we are working with them. It's something where there's a mutual agreement. So yes, we've told everyone you are, and that's fine. Carry on with the meeting. So yeah, so that's enough from me for the moment. I'll ask Jeanette to add from the point of view of the because the legal officers also have been going through the report very carefully to ensure that it meets our needs. So and that there's some indications, I think, of where if we agree this, where it goes into our constitution. So Jeanette, could you amplify that?
Hopefully there's not an awful lot to add, because the document's quite comprehensive in setting out that this is the governance framework for the two committees. Clearly there are some delegated executive and non-executive functions, and that's why both the executive cabinet has to approve this establishment of the committee, as well as ensuring that this goes to full council and they agree to setting this up. As Martin has just mentioned, if you do obviously agree to delegate the functions and agree to the establishment of the joint committee as well as the scrutiny committee, then, and you recommend that onto council, then part of that is also that we adopt the documents that are included in the appendix. There are an awful lot of Appendix 1 and A and all over the place, but it's basically the terms of reference for the committee, the standing orders that apply to that committee, as well as, again, the scrutiny committee and the standing orders for that. So that will go into section, if it's agreed with full council, it would go into our section 11, which is joint arrangements. And that's all I think I need to add at this stage, Chair, unless you want me to say anything more.
No, thank you very much. I think if we take questions at this point, and then I'll go on to representatives, and then I'll after that I'll move the report. So Steve, oh right, that was a legacy hand, right?
No, I put it. Oh no, I was intending to put it up again actually.
Right, yeah, okay, over to you. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, let me just get the right page up on the screen. So just to clarify, in 4.3 on statutory planning functions, the note 5 covers strategic matters, application approval. It doesn't specifically say local plans, but I assume it means local plans under strategic planning matters.
Yes.
And I think the only other question is, I understand how this is intended to work. What I think we need to be clear about is how it interacts with the rest of the council, how it reports what it's doing to the council, and how the scrutiny function interacts with the council. So that's clearly not part of the agreement, but it's part of the changes to the council's constitution that presumably will be brought forward when this goes to council. Am I correct about that?
I would say yes. I'll look to Anthony or Jeanette to clarify that, but certainly we would need to arrange. Well, by being a statutory committee, it will be open to the public anyway, so that its deliberations will be open. In terms of
the point I was making was that it also needs to feed back to the council in some way.
Yeah, indeed.
So in the same way that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee reports to the council periodically, the Growth Scrutiny Committee will need to, and there needs to be some mechanism for from the point of view of the executive function, for the council to be aware of what the Growth Board is doing. And I know that in practice, whoever is the member will tell us, but it needs to be set out formally somewhere, doesn't it?
No, I was going on to say I agree with you. That's something we need to actually put into our processes. Anthony?
I would have thought the logical place to report back would be in the strategic planning matters report that comes to Cabinet at each meeting.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. Paul?
Thank you. I mean, I fully agree with this and understand Anthony's point, so happy to take that on board. I just wanted to make the comment about Hertfordshire is not an island, and it's brilliant that we're doing all these bits and pieces within Hertfordshire, but we do need to link it up outside. There's things like the East of England heartlands one side, there's South Cambridgeshire and Cambridgeshire the other side, and things need to go beyond our borders, just so that there's joined up thinking across the country. As I say, Hertfordshire is not alone on it, working on its own. We do need to work with others.
Yeah, totally agree, Paul. Yeah, Judy?
I was more at the Steve end of being concerned about this, not that Hertfordshire has borders that we need to stretch beyond. I'm still worried about what we do with this within the council, because whilst I'm sure Anthony's right that it being reported under planning matters to Cabinet is probably formally the best thing to do, I do worry a lot about the ways in which we do as a Cabinet or don't keep the rest of our colleagues informed about what's going on. You know, we have a huge commitment to dealing nicely with the communities we serve, and I'm not sure we always quite manage to do it inside the council with our colleagues. So it would be nice to think of some special events at which we could report informally or hear more about the work of the Growth Board for all 47 to 49, depending what day of the week it is, councillors of the local authority.
No, thank you, Judy. It's a point well made, and something when we were in opposition that we complained bitterly about, that not enough came to council. So we ought to be consistent and make sure we bring as much as we can at appropriate times to the council. And whether this is something we can build into our structures, following on from reports to Cabinet, that at certain times during the year we do a report to council. I'd like to see that built in, I have to say. But Anthony, do you want to come in before I bring Ian?
Just to say, absolutely, we can figure it out outside of this meeting how best to feed back, whether that's sort of through workshops or whether it's cabinet referring something on to council or just straight reporting to council. I'm sure there's sort of any number of different ways we can do that to make sure people are informed of what's going on.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I should say that the briefing note that I circulated to the cabinet execs and deputies today will be circulated. We're saying we will circulate it so that all members of the council see it before we report this to council. So that's a start, and I hope we go on in that vein. Ian Elbert.
Thanks, Jay. I mean, yes, just to briefly agree with some of those last comments from Judy and Anthony and others. I think this is a welcome initiative. It's really important that we as a council ensure that we communicate this both to the things that we're doing, to residents, to members, and making sure that members feel that they have an input into that and be able to influence and input the thinking of those going to the meetings and the views of this council in a timely way. It's so they don't feel done to, but it's really done with. And I think that's it's an important message about how we engage with colleagues across all the parties on the council on this, because I think it's a really important initiative. But equally, we want to make sure that it's done well, and we are actually doing the things that we think are key priorities for this council, and making sure that all members have a chance to get involved and have a say at the right time around that. But no, I support the recommendations. But yeah, with those sort of just comments that I'm sure we can pick up.
Okay, thanks very much. I don't see any more hands. So if that's all the discussion, then we go back to the recommendations. I don't know if you want me to read them all out. They are all in front of you. I don't propose to unless somebody asks me to. But what I do need to say in respect of 2.5, that the assumption in the papers I'm sure you've read is that the leader of the council will be the representative, with the deputy leader, if he is available, being the substitute, because you will see that there's a sensible arrangement to substitute so that we can send somebody forward with 5 days notice, which means that obviously in the case of the cabinet as it is, Paul would be the substitute if I'm not available. Pardon me. But if he wasn't available, then we could select somebody else to be the substitute. Similarly, with regard to scrutiny, I have notified David Levitt that that's my intention. It will be the chair of scrutiny will be the representative on the scrutiny committee, and if he is not available, first the vice chair or another person if she was not available. So with those provisos, I don't think they actually need to be written in. I'll ask Hilary whether that we need to actually say that specifically.
We can put it in the recommendations if you so wish.
I think that probably is the simplest thing. Then it's very clear. So I will then move the recommendations with those.
Councillor, can I stop you? And Councillor Hoskins has obviously dropped out at some point. He won't be able to vote because he hasn't heard the whole thing, but I'll just let him back in.
Right. Okay.
And Councillor Clark has a hand up as well, just so you know.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to move it. Are you going to put your hand up to second, Paul, or do you want to speak as well?
Both. Yes. Hand up. Happy to second. The only thing I wanted to do in acting as substitute, I will need to be briefed ongoing what's happening. I've been involved in a couple of meetings in the initial setup, but obviously things have moved on. So I will need, if I am going to substitute because you're not available, I will need a better understanding, because Ian Albert is quite right in saying I'm representing the council, not just a viewpoint that I might have. I've got to everybody's thing, so I need to be properly understand the way we're going forward. So it may be that we need to catch up more regularly on that particular item, but I'm happy to second.
Yeah, going forward, of course, as you know, you and I have kept up to date on the generalities, but going forward, this will be a public meeting, and therefore the information will be out there in the public, so much easier. But yeah, as you know, that's an open door as far as I'm concerned. I will do my best to keep you fully briefed, as I've always done, but where there are specifics, then obviously yes, that's absolutely fine. Anthony.
Yeah, just to confirm, we can absolutely ensure that we can pick it up in our regular Monday meetings if we need to, and it may also make sense to keep Ian Fullstone in the loop as well, on a similar basis, that he may need to sub for me at some point, and obviously planning falls within his area. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think if there are no more hands, we can move to the vote on the recommendations. You'll have two that we pass and 3 recommendations to full council. So
yes,
if you'd
Chair.
like to vote. Hilary?
Yeah, I was just saying yes, Chair, I'm ready when you are.
Thank you. That is carried.
Yes.
Thanks very much. So we then move on to item 4, which is the business rate pool, and I'll remind you that there was an addendum that's been circulated as well, which means that the recommendations at the end, there is a slightly different recommendation. But I think Ian Albert, do you want to introduce first? I know Ian Fullstone, Ian Cooper is going to. Too many Ians. Ian Fullstone is going to.
Somebody called Ian is going to do most of this.
It's been a long day.
So
Ian Cooper is going
the Ian combinations will sort this out one way or another. Thanks, Chair. And as I say, mainly to draw your attention to that addendum that you got today, and obviously apologies for the short notice. There was only a meeting yesterday of the relevant councils around this issue, and a presentation from LG Futures. That we have been part of a business rate pool for some time, for most of the years that the pools existed. There isn't clearly normally advantages for the council, and that helps to reduce our levy that we pay to Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government. But obviously it goes without saying, business rates are a subject of some uncertainty this year, hence the reason why this additional work has been done. I'm going to get Ian to go through the detail of the paper in a moment. Our recommendation is, and I think perhaps to sort of cut into the end, is that we do take part within the pool this year as part of that optimum pool of 5 councils and the county. It clearly is a more balanced decision this year because of the pandemic and a whole deal of uncertainty. But we still think on balance that this is the right recommendation. It still obviously gives us an opportunity later early in the new year to take a final decision around the pool. It would still do that, and that's set out in the executive summary of the addendum, which obviously follows the provisional funding settlement. But I'm going to get Ian to go through the detail with you. Then obviously Chair will be open to kind of questions and comments, and we can debate the recommendation. So Ian, do you want to pick up the really particularly from the presentation from yesterday?
Thank you, Councillor Albert. So I'll go through the addendum report in perhaps a bit more detail than usual on the basis you've only received it late this afternoon. So paragraph 8.2, I'll start from there on page 4 of the addendum. What I've set out there are the various scenarios that will count towards what are in effect the collectible rates, which is the key number in determining across the members of the pools what that number is, and therefore what the gain or loss would be from pooling all those business rates together. The key conclusion from all that is that in a normal year, you would base your assumptions on the previous year and make a few tweaks to it to get to an estimate for the next year. Obviously, we're not in a normal year in many ways, but and part of that is in relation to forecasting business rates. So that's why we, LG Futures, the sort of expert consultants in this area, have done this work looking at different ways of what business rates might be for next year to give us confidence around whether it is worth pooling or not. The graph in paragraph 8.3 at the top of page 5, I think is very interesting in sort of showing that this is a decision that's based on taking risk with a potential, hopefully, for reward, but there is some risk of loss, and that is basically the decision we're making is where we sit on that kind of that risk spectrum of making that decision. So the base position on the far right of that graph is that if things transpired as we thought they might do in January of this year, is the forecast for the current year, the pooling gain would be around that 4 million across all the authorities. But as the general business rates decline, it takes you closer and closer to a break-even point where it's not worth pooling. And that's where the blue and red line cross at around about where it's labelled 155. And then for a brief period, you go into a position whereby you're worse off in a pooling arrangement. And that's where if each authority acted individually, they'd hit the safety net, which is where the NHCLG would fund the losses beyond a certain point. But as part of the pool has a different threshold for a safety net, and therefore that doesn't kick in until you get much further down the graph. But then when you hit sort of significant declines in business rates where it sort of joins up again at 143, that is where it makes no difference if you're pooled or not, albeit that's a pretty bad position to be in, but that's what that graph means. So in terms of LG Futures looking at some of these different ways of assessing the benefits or not of pooling, paragraph 8.4 looks at the fact that it's very unlikely that the impacts of COVID-19 will affect all businesses equally. And therefore, there's been some assessment around trying to categorise different types of businesses as different risk groups, and then going with higher, medium and lower risk businesses. And in that paragraph, it sets out the kind of types of business that would fall into each of those categories. The examples I've given there, given we're looking at a very long list of different types of businesses, are the ones that are most prevalent in North Herts. So that have the highest rateable value in each of those groups. So the lowest risk or the lower risk include supermarkets and food shops, factories and local authority buildings. It does exclude local authority leisure centres in there. And in the and then the other groups are kind of working away from that in terms of the different levels of risk for each of those groups. You know, we are quite lucky in terms of relatively in terms of the situation in that we have got quite a high number of in that lower risk group. We have got 51%, and that basically represents a lot of our rateable value is driven by supermarkets, which are obviously people need food still, and some factories, you know, particularly Johnson Matthey over in Royston is quite a large element of our business rates base, and also we've got a lot of smaller businesses in our base as well. So then the table in that paragraph is around what some different scenarios and the drops in those in rateable income, dependent on which group those all fall into. And then the sort of bit below that little table is sort of says what the forecast position is. And as you'll see, under scenario 1 and 2, it's still a pooling gain. In scenario 2, it's still a gain of 2.3 million overall and a £400,000 gain for North Hertfordshire. But there is a loss in scenario 3. It is currently considered that scenario 3 is unlikely, and it's more likely to be in a position of scenario 1 or scenario 2. But equally, we just don't know at this stage, and I'll come on to later that kind of that get out clause that sort of Councillor Albert mentioned a bit earlier. In terms of the optimum pool, There are various ways of assessing it. I'm not going to go through all of them, but in every single way of determining it that LG Futures went through, we are either in second or third place at the top in terms of being part of that pool, and therefore the optimum pool does include us, and it also includes Broxbourne, Dacorum, Hartsmere, Three Rivers, and necessarily has to include the County Council as well, as they are part of the way that the system all works in terms of benefits arising from it. In paragraph 8.6 in the addendum report, so far I've looked at there being a general decline in business rates, both generally and in terms of specific types of business. There is a risk to each individual authority. They could be in a worse position just because they buck the trend. So the example given there is where one authority's businesses are doing reasonably well, but all the other members of the pool's businesses are not doing so well. And essentially, the authority that's doing well is sort of dragged into supporting those businesses that aren't those authorities that aren't doing well. Given what we're looking at here and a sort of general potentially economic decline, it is unlikely, given both that and the sort of geographical proximity of all being in Hertfordshire, it is unlikely that one will particularly buck the trend. And equally, we have done some work across all the authorities around looking for those particular hereditaments that are higher risk, and seeing any of those that kind of could cause a big impact. And we haven't identified any in terms of the members of the pool, proposed members of the pool. Paragraph 8.788 to talk about some of the sort of more detailed arrangements. So 8.7 is there will need to be a memorandum of understanding between the 6 pool members around how it will work, and that's out there in a rough terms what that will be. It will be aligned to what we've done in previous pooling arrangements, so there'll be no surprises. But because I'm not ready quite yet, I'm just looking for delegation to myself in consultation with Councillor Albert to formally sign that off, to make sure we meet all the deadlines in relation to that. And then paragraph 8.8 is quite important, and something that all the proposed members of the pool are signed up to is there will be another review in that sort of early to mid-January period, just to do a double check around whether this is still what we want to do and decide whether we all want to pull out. In reality, only one authority, the part of the pool, has to pull out for it all to just dissolve and disappear and not be a pool anymore. But we obviously look for that to be a joint decision that everyone's signed up to, and obviously hopefully we'll know a bit more about the forecast for the economy and therefore business rates around by that time. But equally, we could still be in a position of be very much uncertain, and it will still be a risk as to what transpires during next year. And therefore, that's why I presented the report to you tonight, saying it seems like there's benefits out of this, but there is a risk at the same time.
Thank you very much, Ian. I've got Ruth first.
Just wanted to check, and I'm sure you've thought of this. In the original report 8.2, you mentioned the pending closure of Morrison's in Royston. I presume that Morrison's is not included in that 51% of lower risk business rates in what you've just reported on there.
It is included, but so 2 things. One, it's not a very big proportion, and we've had that confirmed by LG Futures that actually wouldn't make much difference even if it pays no business rates throughout the entire of next year. But you only get closed business relief for a certain period. So because the premises is leased from another party, they will become liable for business rates after a certain period. So there is a risk around change of use and the rateable value changing, but in reality, it's possible that there'll be full business rates payable throughout the whole of next year, which is what we're looking at in this context.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other questions? Anything, Ian Albert, you want to add, or do you want to move the recommendations?
I'm really, Chair, to move the recommendations, to recognise that this is, as Ian Cooper has said, there is a risk, but there's also an opportunity there. I definitely see this as part of our sort of being brave, if you like. But equally, I think when you look at the scenarios, it feels to me that this is the right decision to take today, and we've got still an opportunity to review that in the new year. So happy to move those recommendations, Chair, in the addendum.
Okay, I will second that from the chair. And I think given that this is in a separate report and people may be watching, I will read the recommendations so that that's absolutely clear before we move to a vote. The recommendations that Cabinet approve that the council is part of a Hertfordshire business rates pool in 21-22, and 2.2 that Cabinet delegate to the Service Director Resources in consultation with the Executive Member of Finance and IT authority to approve the detailed arrangements in relation to the pool, such as a memorandum of understanding. So if we're all clear on that, can we move to the vote? And that is carried. Thank you all very much. That being all on the agenda for this evening. Thank you all for your attendance. Thank you to Hilary and Vic, as always, for their support for the meeting. And